Hi everyone, I'm John C. Morley, the host of the JMOR Tech Talk Show and Inspirations for Your Life. Hey guys, good evening. It is John C. Morley here, serial entrepreneur, and you are tuned into JMOR Tech Talk Show. Do a lot of different shows, so apology about that. You're tuned into the JMOR Tech Talk Show. By the way, IFYL is a great show too. We're just hitting up over 75,000 downloads now. But JMOR Tech Talk Show is a weekly tech show, if you guys are new here, where we share all about technology, why technology works the way it does, and what you should do when it doesn't work the way you expect it. All right. Before we do get launched in the show, there is a QR code there, but if you are watching us on another platform like on Instagram or TikTok and you don't see the QR code, then just go to believemeachieve.com from where my amazing, inspiring creations. And I think you'll really like that. Whether you're here live with us at 10:20 p.m. at night, 10:20 in the morning, 3 a.m., 3 p.m., 12 noon, 12 midnight. Makes no difference what time you're here. I'm really just grateful that you are here with me. And our master topic is, ladies and gentlemen, here it is, where tech brilliance takes center stage. JMOR Tech Talk. We're on show 49. By the way, in case you guys were wondering, yes, this is actually series 2, show 49. So what does the series 2 means? Well, it means we're in our second year, in case you guys were wondering. And so let's kick this right off because I got a lot to talk about. First thing is Microsoft. All right. Microsoft's OpenAI tie-up comes under antitrust scrutiny. So what's all this about? Well, this just happened basically, maybe about 4 or 5 hours ago. The UK looking into whether Microsoft's OpenAI deal harms competition. And Microsoft says to work with CMA in its review, but the US FTC is examining partnership between the companies report, and they move that it follows a rapid advance in AI use. And so London today, December 8th, basically Reuters, which you guys know, researched the Microsoft partnership with ChatGPT maker OpenAI, and is under the US and UK antitrust scrutiny. And the British regulator and media reports said that they're following the startup's boardroom battle that led to the sudden oust and return of CEO Sam Altman. And after a dramatic episode last month, Microsoft, a major OpenAI backer, was granted non-voting observation position at the company by a new 3-member initial board. And Microsoft representative can attend OpenAI board meetings and access confidential information, but cannot vote on matters including electing or choosing directors. Now, the company would not reveal who from Microsoft will take the non-voting position and what a final OpenAI board would look like. I think this is just crazy. It's nuts, if you ask me. And so Sam Altman to return as CEO of OpenAI. And so you have to wonder what's going on. He's returning as the CEO of OpenAI, overcoming the attempted boardroom scandal that happened not too long ago, who quit in protest of Altman's firing, which was Greg Brockman. Remember that? And the company said in a statement that it has an agreement in principle for Altman to return alongside a new board composed of Brett Taylor, Larry Summers, and Adam D'Angelo. D'Angelo is a holdover from the previous board that initially fired Altman on Friday, and he remains on this new board to give the previous board some representative representation, we're told. So I don't know. I think these people don't really know what's going on. And I think this is like a mockery that, what they're doing is not really true, but they're playing games with people. That's my feeling. And I think we as American people have to be concerned about what is going on. And so the CMA is reviewing whether to launch a probe into Microsoft's investment to see if it could hurt UK competition. And the US FTC is also examining whether the investment could have violated antitrust laws. And we're going to have to just see what's going on. The FTC declined, obviously, to comment. And Microsoft President Brad Smith said in a statement, quote, that the only thing that has changed is that Microsoft will now have a non-voting observer on OpenAI's board. I don't know. Where are they going? What are they doing? The CMA is going to need to find evidence that the recent fallout from Altman's affair had led to material changes in governance of OpenAI and Microsoft's influence over its affairs. And we'll just have to see what's going to go on, why it's going to go on, and what's their long game plan. So we're going to definitely keep our nose to the grindstone on that. So I don't know if you guys know, but in 1987, DEC wrote the first paper describing firewall technology. Now, many of you may not know DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, but DEC was always ahead of its time. When I was in college, and they were just always up. High school, they were always just at the top of their game. And so when we think about being at the top of the game, and we think about what happened, and in 1987, like I said, they wrote that first paper, and it was all talking about the premise of the large, quote unquote, castle and moat theory, which we use today for the network security paradigm, where networks are supposed to be protected like the castle and the moat. Because, when we think about the rulers of the kingdoms, the castles were built way up high on a mountain, and then down below was the water, was the moat. And a lot of times we've heard about the fact that, they would put in, they have the water, which would obviously keep people from trying to expose the castle by digging underground. Obviously, that would be a problem. They couldn't do that. And also, it was about the fact that they said that they would put, let's say, alligators and other creatures in the water. But the truth of the matter is that these creatures, like alligators, they can't live in a moat. Did you know that? Alligators can't live in a castle moat. And it's a big list of errors. And they would not survive. And most moats were dry. They didn't have water. So wet moats needed water sources, primarily a river, to feed it. So a lot of times when they said they had a castle and a moat, well, the moat had no water. So the whole point of, the moat really didn't hold water. No pun intended there. So were all castle moats filled with water? And so this is the thing. Usually, but not always filled with water. The existence of a moat was a natural result of early methods of fortification of earthworks for the ditch produced by the removal of earth to form a rampart of valuable parts of the defense system. So they could put a lot of things in there. So the question you might be asking is, so what did castles fill their moats with? And they were usually filled with water from a nearby source, such as spring, lake, or rivers, and dams could be built that would control the level of water in the moat, while some of the fancy moats had stone sides, and most moats had simple banks of earth left over them. So it's interesting when we think about moats. Again, some moats were dry, some were filled, and it was there to protect the empire of the castle. That's really the premise of a moat. So now that we understand what a moat is and why we have a moat, I think the biggest issue comes to play is, how does this play in our life? Well, when we think about castles, right, and we think about networks, They're both something that's very important to us in life. If a network goes down, our business might be out. If a castle gets destroyed, that might lead to the ruin of the empire that's being ruled, right? So when we think about a moat, when we think about a network, we think about protection. So DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, was on exactly the right path, and they were on it way before anyone else. They knew that this is something the world needed to embrace. But, a lot of people were pig-headed, and they didn't believe in what was going on. They didn't understand what the network security paradigm was, And in 2001, the IEEE released the 802.1x standard. And so you might be asking, well, what is the 802.1 standard? Yeah, it's the 802.1x standard. And so it was NAC, Network Access Control. And so the basic premise was that if you plug something into a port, that port would not have access to the network unless it was granted. So NAC enabled administrators to provide uniform access control across wired and wireless networks, so they could manage whether access was granted or not granted. And this, grew as we, let's say, fell into the BYOD, bring your own device, social media, cloud computing, and enterprise networking resources. It was a game changer for everyone. And so you'd probably be asking, well, what can you do with 802.1x network control? So there are many things that you can do, and ways to deploy a NAC. But the main thing is pre-admission control, blocking authenticated messages, devices and user detection, identifying users and devices with predefined credentials or machine IDs like the MAC IDs. If we don't see the right MAC ID, well, we just don't pay attention to it. We don't talk to it. Authentication, authorization, verifying and providing access, onboarding, providing information that a device needs so we can make sure it's correct before security management gets basically deployed. Profiling, scanning endpoint devices, policy enforcement, post-admission control, and these are just some of the things. But I feel a lot of people didn't realize what was going on. So 802.1x is the following. We start out with initiation, and typically a switch or a client device sends the request, and the other device, basically, once it sends the EAP response to the device to the authenticator, the message then comes back to authenticate it or not to allow. Authentication then either happens, messages pass between the authentication server and the device to validate the piece of information, whether this is correct. Do we have the right MAC? Is it coming from the right subnet? If the credentials are valid, the authentication server notifies the authenticator, says, hey, I'm letting you through and I'm giving access to the port. There's accounting issues like with radius accounting, keeping session records, including users and device details. And then there's termination. Sessions are terminated by disconnecting the endpoint device by using management software. So the great thing about 802.1x is that it allows a good way that people can actually control their networks. That's right. I said it's a great way. But the problem was a lot of people were against this concept. Yeah, they were against it. Why? I think they were against it because they really didn't know what was happening. They didn't know why things were happening. They didn't know really a lot of anything. And so when we think about 802.11x, it didn't catch on immediately, but it did eventually catch on. So you'll be happy, to know that. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is DISA. So DISA is very interesting because, see, DISA, if you guys know who DISA is, but DISA is the Defense Information System Agency, and DOD is the Department of Defense. And they release their work, okay, ladies and gentlemen, regarding something that's very, very important. And that was regarding their paper. And this really was talking about the ZTA. And so the ZTA, which in English, to kind of break this down for you, ZTA is not a new concept. They published this in 2007. But again, in 2007, they were already starting to come on board with ZTA, Zero Trust Access, which we're going to talk more about. Google implemented their first ZTA code name, basically Beyond Corp, an open source implementation of this on the Google servers, and it came to fruition because of research that was done on a paper called Transcend, and that's where the whole thing actually, started getting wings from. So ZTA is not new. It seems like it just came out of the woodwork, but it's been formulating for years. It's just nobody really gave it wings so that it could breathe. But these different shifts and these different authority figures that we're seeing definitely made a huge change. It allowed people to understand it. And I know that you're probably on the fence and saying, hey, John, this sounds crazy. It's not. Well, let me talk to you about a real life example. How many of you guys remember Sony? They're still around, Sony Corporation? Well, I got news for you guys. Sony didn't just get hacked. They got nuked from the inside. Well, what does that mean, John? Why do I care that Sony was, not just hacked, they were nuked from the inside? Well, you should care because most firewalls are designed with the premise to protect things, okay, coming into the network. But one thing they don't protect? They don't protect traffic inside the network. So if you got a bad actor, whether it's a contractor, employee, vendor, etc., and they deploy malicious code through a USB or what have you, and it starts inside the organization. Well, because of the way security was designed years ago, people figure, well, nobody's going to try to attack from within. Yeah, that's what they did. And because nobody expected it, that's exactly what they did. And because there was no protection against it, it brought Sony to their knees. Now, they didn't know what happened, right? Sony didn't know they were attacked internally. So by understanding that the hackers had physical access during the attack, that's obviously what went on, okay? And I will tell you that according to employees who speak to Salted Hash on the condition that their name should not be allowed, the corporate network is still had some major issues. And again, when this was originally published back around 2018, there were issues, right? VPN access being unavailable. Sony pulled the plug on the network in Culver City in New York, while overseas operations were either limited or offline in many cases. Now, it was hacked by a GOP warning. And this is the quote that they got from the hack. It says, quote unquote, "We've already warned you, and this is just a beginning. We continue till our requests be met. We've obtained all your internal data, including your secrets and top secret clips. If you don't obey us, we'll release data shown below to the world. Determine what you'll do till November the 24th, 11 p.m. GMT. Now, the problem started when a group called itself GOP triggered a login script that would display a warning message anytime an employee logged into their corporate account. The message demanded that Sony meet previously established demands, but the exact nature of these demands was not very clear. And failure to do so would result in the publication of compromised internal documents. Now, the GOP list included private key files, source code files, password files for Oracle, SQL databases, inventory lists for hardware, other assets, network maps, outlines, productions, scripts, basically shoot lists, financial documents, other information, and more. But in a statement, Sony would only confirm, and I quote, they're investigating an IT matter, refusing to discuss any more details. And when contacted, the GOP remained silent for most of Monday. But it changed the next day when someone claimed to represent the group started emailing the media. Well, according to statements made by GOP, not just Salted Hash, but to The Verge as well, the group had physical access to the Sony network. And that access likely happened because someone on the inside helped. Yeah. Quote unquote, I've already contacted the UK register with details. Quote, and wrote Lena, the name associated with the GOP account that responded to Salted Hash on that Tuesday morning. However, quote, I'll tell you this, we don't want money. We want equality. Sony left their doors unlocked and it bit them. They don't do physical security anymore. In a statement to The Verge, Lena referenced the need for equality once again, adding that Sony didn't want such a thing and that it was an upward battle, close quote. So, quote, according to Lena, Sony doesn't lock their doors physically, so we work with our other staff with similar interests to get in. I'm sorry I can't say more. Safety for our team is important. This is what they told The Verge. Now, if the claims are true and the GOP had help from the inside in order to accomplish their aims, this is a major disaster for Sony. And it's one thing leading to another for an attacker to gain access from the outside. But to get help from the inside, that's like crazy. So physical security related to breaches, including those that had helped people from the outside, from the inside, very difficult to contain. And so the issue was Sony didn't have ZTA. Nobody knew what ZTA was, zero trust access, zero trust network access. Nobody knew, because the whole idea of you hacking a computer from the inside, well, it was kind of like nobody did it. But that's exactly what viruses and a lot of malicious code and spyware do. They go after what you don't know. And then by the time you do know, it's way too late. And there's nothing for you to do, and there's really nothing else. But the fact that you wish you would have thought of that. Now, because of this, we have problems, right? Now, you're probably asking me, hey, John, did the government have any internal, let's say, hack attacks? Well, yeah. So they had things called end of life. Many U.S. governments said the agencies had been hacked as part of a broader cyber attack. And dozens of other companies. And the list kept growing. And so, in fact, CISA and the FBI issued a warning that the CLOP was exploiting a previously unknown vulnerability in MoveIt. Okay, program they all use to transfer files back and forth. And in a rapid hacking spree, the group used the flaw to steal files from at least 47 organizations and demand payment not to publish them online. So the question is, sometimes people don't want money. Sometimes people just want to let others know that they're wrong and that they're right. Sometimes, like they said, they're just going to get equality, and it could be equality for anything from race, religion, sexual orientation, creed, color. It could be a variety of things. So the question you might be asking is, why did GOP hack Sony? Well, GOP, just so you know, stands for Guardians of Peace. And on November 24th, Sony employees came to work in Culver City, California to find images of grinning red skulls on computer screens. And the hackers identified themselves as GOP, or the Guardians of Peace. And they made off with vast amounts of data. The reports had suggested somewhere near 100 terabytes. Wiped company hard drives and began dumping sensitive documents on the internet. And the sensitive information the hackers divulged, salary, personnel records for tens of thousands of employees, as well as Hollywood stars. Embarrassing email traffic between executives and movie moguls and lots of other things. And even things like unreleased feature films. It was a real mess. Who did it? That's the million-dollar question. The suspicion has targeted in on the North Korean government or a band of allied hacktivists. The Hermit Kingdom is the apologetic over the interview, and when they're originally interviewed. And so the issue is there's speculation. This doesn't mean that the North Korean government or even the same hacker collective is responsible. In the world of cyber warfare, hackers will often dissect and imitate successful techniques because they've worked at other times for other people. So the question is, why did Sony scrub the interview? Because they did. People who may or may not have been tied to the hackers posted a vague message threatening the 9/11 style attacks against other threats and chose to play the film. And the U.S. Department of Homeland Security said that there wasn't any evidence of a credible threat against the American movie theaters, but several major chains, including the AMC and Regal, decided to play it safe. All told, changed that control about half of the country's movie screens decided against playing the interview. Sony then followed suit, pulling the movie entirely. So were theaters in danger? It's tough to say for sure. And North Korea had made lots of threats toward the U.S. before this. And will we ever get to see the interview? Probably. The movie costs about $44 million to make, and according to documents leaked by the hackers, the ad campaign so far had cost tens of millions on top of that. And you can't see the interview, but Times movie critic did. What will most likely happen is some limited release in the future when everything calms down might come out. And so the issue is that how did the hackers do it? Well, they don't know exactly, but it can be said that there was a coding error or an employee who clicks on an infected link. I have to believe that it was an employee that clicked on a link that helped the bad actor get in. So somebody was working on the inside. FireEye, the parent company of the cybersecurity firm Sony hired to probe the hack, studied the network security of more than 1,200 banks, government agencies, and manufacturers over a 6-month period, ending in 2014, and found that 97% had their last line of defense breached at some point in time. You see, banks think they're impetuous to hackers. I want to tell you something. They're not. Not that everyone's perfect, but banks always think they're the greatest. I do security for a lot of banks, and I can give them recommendations on how they can improve the security, how they can become better. But you know what a lot of them don't want to do? They don't want to take my advice. I tell them time and time again, this is a problem. This needs to be addressed. You're going to link personal information out there. And if this gets out, your bank could potentially be under serious legal implications. And they really don't take it too seriously because they don't want to spend any money. So once the hackers, had gotten in, they try to gain elevated security permissions to spread across the network. And what made the Sony hack different was the fact that it wasn't detected until large quantities of data had been swiped. And what stood out, what several analysts say, was not the sophistication of the breach, but the havoc the culprits sought to wreak. Quote, the attack was very targeted, very well thought out, and they had, if not one, there might have been more people on the inside. But the thing is, there are lots of groups out there that do this not for money. They do this because they know that some companies are acting in an immoral or in a way that, let's say, is being unfair, right? Maybe it's the case that you've hired people, and maybe for whatever reason, those people in the company, let's say hypothetically, were taking data, and maybe they're the big CEOs, and they're taking this data and they happen to know that they're making millions of dollars off this data, but nobody's really learning about it because they're being so smug. They want to expose them. So either A, they're going to go and pay the piper, number one, and they're going to come clean. They don't even want any money. Or they're going to get terminated from the company and be punished. So they're either asking the person to stop their ways. A lot of times they don't want to do anything. They just want to get the hacker to the person that's, let's say, stealing the data, I should say. Because the hacker is trying to get the person that's, let's say, compromising the company's data. I knew a company not too long ago that had it was a SolidWorks designer. And the funny thing is, the guy actually was fired. Okay, that's a red flag, right? Well, about a year later, they brought this guy back. Now, this guy was very arrogant. And I just knew something was up with this guy. I didn't exactly know what it was, but I knew something was up. And what I knew was that this, what he was doing was probably so bad that it would cause problems down the road. And guess what? One morning, I got a phone call. And they noticed that the files he was working on were open on his desktop. But one day he screwed up and he left files open. But he went so far as to leave the USB stick in the computer. He just totally forgot. Then we ran a track to see what he had copied in the last 30 days. You know what we found? Design files. Files that the company was bidding on to do. Files that he took and that he might have been engaging with them directly. So I told the directors of the company, they said, well, he's a good guy. We really don't want to do anything. And they let that person basically cause him damage until a customer came to them and told them that the work they were doing was getting exploited. Now they had to react. Now he decides he wants to do forensics and do all this stuff. But when we find the data, guess what he decides he doesn't want to do? He doesn't want to press charges. See, that makes no sense to me. I hope Sony has learned from this lesson. That's the biggest thing. All right, so we know one issue. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that the government has gotten hacked many times? They've gotten hacked because of end-of-life software being too cheap to want to upgrade, right? There are two major federal government agencies, I'm not going to name which ones, and the hackers attacked the agencies by targeting public-facing servers that were running outdated end-of-life Adobe Cold Fusion software used for building web applications. End-of-life software means that the developer has announced publicly it will no longer support or receive further software or security updates. We've seen this with Microsoft before. Running end-of-life software is by definition risky because it cannot be patched. And exposing the organization who runs the software to cyber attacks is a very, very big problem. And so when we think about this, they've got burnt. One of the vulnerabilities, the critical vulnerability CVEs, critical vulnerability exposures, CVEs, known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, is the Adobe Cold Fusion deserialization of untrusted data vulnerability. The Adobe Cold Fusion contains a deserialization of untrusted data vulnerability that allows for remote code execution. Apply updates per vendor instructions, known to be used in ransomware campaigns, possibly. Started coming out 3/15/2023 is when they were aware of it. Due to be fixed by 4/5/2023. That's crazy. So why is this happening? So CVEs stands for common vulnerabilities and exposures. And so a lot of times, these companies get notified things like this are happening. But they feel, oh, that's not going to happen to us. We got all this great security. Yeah, you got all this great security that could be crippled at the click of a button. I mean, that's why in Outlook programs, we tell people to disable the auto loading of the message so that viruses and things can't auto play. Even if you open a message, it's not going to run the messenger script unless you actually click on that thing. I always recommend to have that off. So, yeah, the government had faced a lot of attacks. A lot. They had, many things. There were clampdowns on federal security after big attacks at the White House. Okay. So the White House planned to release an ambitious strategy to make federal agencies tighten their cybersecurity controls because there are a lot of high-profile hacks against the government that were becoming more prevalent. So in January of 2022, they got serious and they decided that something needed to be done. And guess what they did? They did something they should have done a long time ago. Yes, the government in 2022 is mandating now that all of its offices and agencies be on ZTA infrastructure by 2024. So I think that was, I think what happens with these agencies is, I don't want to say they don't know, but they're being educated by basically by vendors. And these vendors don't necessarily get it. They don't get it. And, the people that are buying this stuff don't get it either. They really don't get it either. So I think when we think about this, the first thing that comes to mind is, first of all, why is the government so susceptible? Well, I think the real reason that this is happening is because of the cost, right? It's not a bid list. They feel that it's not something they should do. And just don't worry about it. It only happened one or two times. But the question I want to ask you is, how much did cyber attacks cost the U.S. government? Let's just say in 2022. Let's just say that. So data breaches led by the United States Postal Service, OPM, okay, they have led pretty high, all right? And by December 30th, 2022, from the past up to that, it estimated that it costs our government close to $26 billion. Now, a lot's changing. There's more ransomware statistics out there. It was $20 billion in 2021. And the number is expecting to rise. Get this, ladies and gentlemen, not 10%, not 20%. If I took the number, okay, 26 billion, okay, and I was going to multiply that, okay, by 100, I get 260 billion. It's going to be slightly over that, guys. Be like 105%. It's estimated that by 2031, that the cost for cybersecurity will be at 265 billion. That's just sick. It's crazy. And I've said this before, guys, whether you have a small company, whether you're a large corporation, or you're independent, those that believe that they don't need to protect themselves will be sorry. Because it's not a question of if you're going to get attacked, but when if you're not properly protected. Let me say that again. It's not a question of if you're going to get attacked, but when if you're not properly protected. It's not a question of if, but when if you're not properly protected. Now, not to get too deep in this, but I do want to explain a little bit about this. You should be protected for things like malware. You should have web filtering, vulnerability scanning. You should have a sandbox, patching. These are all things you should have. So now that we know how important it is to have an infrastructure that is going to make a difference, hopefully you will make a choice to do something immediately, right? And I think if you can embrace the fact that there's going to be a big debacle. And I don't mean to scare people, but I want you to wake up. I don't want you to come in the morning and say, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? And I think that's probably the biggest thing I can tell you right now is that if you don't understand the complexity and how this can greatly affect you, then you're exactly the ones that need to be protected. You're the ones that the bad actors are going to go after. You might say, well, gee, John, I'm a small company and nothing's going to happen to me. One of my clients, I won't name the client, but probably over 20 some years ago, didn't want to do a firewall. I said, okay, no problem. Didn't matter to me. And he's like, that's a lot of money. Okay, no problem. So not even a week or two, I get a call. He's got a problem. And I'll call the guy, Mike, like, hey, Mike, you got hacked. Yeah, well, I have antivirus software. Yeah, but that's not enough. You need a firewall. You need to protect against all these different things. And like, really? People that live behind a firewall for their network have peace of mind. People that don't are going to keep repeating life's lessons, and they're going to get more expensive, and they're going to potentially not only knock your computer out, but they're going to knock your entire infrastructure out, and they might even put you out of business. That's pretty scary. So the cost of protecting yourself is not in the millions, okay? It's not that much. If we were to take a small company, I'm just going to give you a rough number, and let's just say, we put all the kinds of protection that we need to put in. And let's say you had, 10 people, okay? And we divide that, okay? And we divide that number over 365 days, okay? It's going to cost you $1.20. $1.20 per employee or contractor, okay? And I factored that for about 20 employees. So I think knowledge is very key. So now you can understand why the government did this. But we've been starting to see so much about ZTA because of the fact that so many people are just getting knocked. I mean, crazy. So what are the requirements for ZTA? Let's go there. So first of all, ZTA has to be 100% visibility to all devices and users and traffic that is both encrypted and non-encrypted. So in the past, we were only able to see non-encrypted traffic. Now we're able to see encrypted traffic. And MFA, multi-factor authentication, right, is required. It's required. It's a no-brainer. It is required. So now you might be saying, hey, John, this sounds really cool. How do I do it? Well, first thing I want to tell you is why people fail at ZTA implementations. So there are some reasons, but the reasons may or may not shock you. And I have an acronym to help you remember, TOE. We all have a toe, right? We have several toes. So a toe stands for technological, organizational, or economic. Technological, organizational, or economic. And the biggest one is usually economic. The second one is usually organizational because they don't want to do this right now. So my question is to you, would you rather spend that $1.20 per employee now, or would you potentially want to spend, now keep your hat on for this, okay? Not million, billion, okay? Take that number, we're going to divide it by 20 employees, okay? And we're going to divide that by 365 days a year. That means, ladies and gentlemen, would you want to spend $1.20 to protect each employee, or would you potentially like to be paying out $36 billion? That's a lot. That's an awful lot. And the question is, as you put more time into this, the harder it's going to get to fix and the more expensive it's going to be. Right? Just like with your health. If you take care of yourself, your health bills are low. If you don't, your health bills are very high. So now you know why ZTA fails, right? The technological, the organizational, and the economic. But this shouldn't impede you from doing it. If you don't have the technical skills, hire somebody. Organizational skills, get your company on board. Talk to some other companies that are, maybe talk to some companies of similar size, or maybe even in your organization that are not competitors. Maybe you're in the medical field. Maybe you do metal implants. Maybe there's another pharmaceutical company and they manufacture things, but they don't do metal implants. Maybe they do surgical supplies. Now you might say, John, they're very different. They are, but they have a very similar risk factor. And once somebody gets in trouble in the health industry, everybody sues everyone, unfortunately. I was talking to somebody the other day who was giving us a quote on insurance for something. And he was telling me that he was getting sued. And I said to him, oh, may I ask why? He says, oh, I said, it's stupid. He said, I was backing up. My neighbor, we don't even get along with them. And I tapped their car. And so I got out. I went to the door. And I was just backing up because I just went to go pick up pizza to bring home. And I tapped the car. I just pulled in, went to the door, and spoke to his wife. And she said, oh, don't worry about it. It's no problem. She looked at it. Everything's fine. An hour later, the lady came back out, rang my doorbell. You know what she said? Oh, there's a lot of damage. What kind of damage? Well, there's a lot of damage underneath. It's sad when people, let's say, stoop to suing because they can't be ethical. That's what's really sad. There was another story that I heard real quick about this similar. There was a charity. Now, I belong to a charity. I'm a president of a charity. And they were having this event to help raise money for whether it was Cancer Society or Heart Association, whatever it was. And they had this big festival. Well, when the festival was over, one of the trucks, when it was exiting, it went over one of the lawns, and it made maybe a little bit of a divot or a little bit of tire marks in the lawn. Well, the homeowner didn't contact the charity and say, hey, could you help us fix this? No, they went to a lawyer and sued the charity for the tire marks. Now, the question you might be asking yourself is, John, how expensive or what is the cost to repair tire marks from a truck on your lawn? It could be anywhere from $500 to $1,000. But they didn't need to sue the association. They would have been willing to help it. In fact, the fact that they are an association, they had connections with people that would have been happy to go in there and fix it at no charge. But people just get all up in themselves. I don't know why. I wish more people in the world would want to help people. Then our world would be an even better place. All right, I got one more topic to cover with you guys tonight. And that is this. Meta rolls out encrypted messaging by default for Facebook and Messenger. What the heck is this all about, John? You heard me. Meta rolls out encrypted messages for Facebook and so I think that's a pretty cool thing. Rolls it out because basically for messages, and I think this, ladies and gentlemen, could be a serious problem. I mean, a serious problem. So Meta is rolling out messaging for encrypted and non-encrypted messages on Facebook. And this just rolled out about a day or so ago. And users of Meta's Facebook and the Messenger app will now automatically gain the protection of end-to-end encryption, which is supposedly going to be a major boost in security and privacy, which was just impacted this past Wednesday. And this was been deliberated about for a long time to keep users' messages from prying eyes by scrambling their contents to everyone but the intended senders and recipients. But the move could trigger some other opposition by government officials who have warned that making messages harder for third parties to read might facilitate criminal activity. And Meta had been public about its plans to make encrypted messages the default mode for its messaging, but the companies and other messaging services like WhatsApp defaulted encrypted communication in 2016. And so this was a slow path. So you might be saying, gee, how does the new, let's say, Meta encrypted messages work? Well, that's a great question. It's an end-to-end encryption. And so it's just keeping the messages in the right hands. That's basically the main thing. Messenger previously had the option to turn on end-to-end encryption, a line to be read. Now it's something that has to be enabled automatically. So pretty cool there. Guys, we have covered a lot today. We have talked about ZTA, Zero Trust Access, Zero Trust Network Access. Remember, ZTA is basically, just to get you guys, the last point I want to talk about here is, so ZTA is one part of it, right? Have you asked me, John, what is the difference between ZTA and ZTNA? All right, so ZTA is knowing about who and what is controlling on your network, okay? ZTNA gets more into the devices, okay? Governing access to networks, applications, and this is something that has grown so much in just the last 14 months, okay? So ZTA, ZTAA, and ZTNA. All right, so Zero Trust is all about the concept that we should trust nothing and validate everything, right? Zero Trust doesn't imply trust just because you're at a certain network location. Zero Trust Access is a security model that offers end-to-end zero trust across all systems, right? Everything has to be trusted before it'll be allowed. And Zero Trust Network Access is the most popular and widely used model of the ZTA architecture. And it provides users access to network systems and assets after proper authentication and verification. And again, they use the multi-factor authentication. But the big question is this. It's got to be made more mandatory. Just like we had PCI compliance, I think what's going to happen is they got to mandate that companies are using ZTA as their method. I think so. Well, guys, it's been an amazing privilege, a pleasure, and honor to be with you this fantastic evening. Before I do say goodbye, which unfortunately I have to do, I'm John C. Morley. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I'm a podcast host and a podcast coach and a specialist in helping businesses tell a story that leads to them growing and being more scalable and profitable. Typically work with companies that bring in 10 million or more. And I love to help people find their story, tell their story. That's what I love to do. I hope you guys have an amazing evening, and I'm going to catch you guys next week. All right, be sure to check out more of my great content at believemeachieve.com, and we'll see you real soon, everyone. All right, be well.